Hello, this is Darren Pulsifer, Chief Solution Architect of Public Sector at Intel, and welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology. On today's episode, developing a cloud strategy and operating model with special guest Rajiv Mandal, Cloud Solution Architect at Intel. Rajiv, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Darren.
Hey, so Rajiv, before we dive into cloud strategy and operating models and things like that, let's first hear about you. Where do you come from? What's your background? And why in the world are you an expert in cloud?
Absolutely, Darren. And again, thank you very much for having me on this talk here. So my name is Rajiv Mandal, and I'm one of the cloud solution architects at Intel. I joined Intel about 2.5 years back in the cloud team. I was actually the number 5 cloud solutions architect.
I remember when you got hired in. Yeah,
yeah, one of the early birds. And ever since, the journey has been super exciting because in this role, I have been able to talk to many different customers across pretty much all business verticals, both within commercial and within the public sector, and also across a vast ecosystem of our partners, like whether they be like ISV partners or technology partners, creating specific optimized products, or our system integrator partners. And in that experience, having the ability to learn about the different use cases our customers are trying to implement or migrate to the cloud, how they are looking upon their cloud journey, how they are looking upon their strategies for like hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, private cloud, and everything in between. That's super powerful because while we want our customers to architect the best on top of Intel, we also want to understand what their use cases are and what makes them successful to their customers. So that way we can, bring in the best act together from our side and from our partner side as well.
Oh, okay. So I obviously you understand cloud really well. Where did you get all that knowledge? You didn't get it all at Intel, right? Because you haven't been here that long.
Well, to be honest, I mean, all that knowledge is, still a very small drop in the ocean because that ocean is always increasing with all the.
It's always increasing, yeah.
Yep. But I would like to say that, I started my, kind of cloud exposure. Like I have been working in this industry for more than 23 years now, but my real cloud exposure started back in 2015 when I was actually leading the quality engineering team in Amazon Fresh. And my first project was to launch Amazon Fresh in London as a grocery delivery service. And within that space, as I understood the business, but what came to mind is that how do we scale the infrastructure? How do we scale the application? How do we keep the uptime of the application? How do we monitor our application, the health in cloud, right? Because there, a lot of the products and the services that my team worked on were cloud-based services. That's where I came to know about Redshift. That's what I came to know about Amazon RDS. That's what I came to know about Lambda. So Lambda function. So that passion started right then. And I got the opportunity to talk to some of our leaders in AWS. And it was very clear to me that if I have to stay engaged in some of the real happening things in this space, I have to be much more focused on cloud. So internally, I made a transition to AWS from Amazon Fresh. And I supported a lot of our healthcare and life science customers as the lead account solutions architect, kind of being their technology, kind of the leader from an AWS perspective, and helping the customers not only just migrate, but also modernize applications when they're in the cloud. And that
okay, so you cut your teeth on AWS, total AWS indoctrination. But I know better because you also work in Azure now. And also Google?
Yeah, that's the beauty of Intel. And I didn't realize that when I was in AWS because I could only talk about AWS. I had no knowledge or the need to know much about other cloud providers. I didn't have the need to know about data centers or on-premises. That was kind of outside of jurisdiction per se. I didn't need to know about any of the other cloud providers as well, unless there was a super compute environment that I was working on. Right. Also, I never needed to know about, private cloud environments like, Dell Apex or HP Greenlake. But in the last 2.5 years of my journey here at Intel, that has been the phenomenal, kind of the learning, the knowledge, the whole 360-degree view that I can focus on all these different aspects, whether it is one cloud provider or multiple cloud providers, a private cloud, or even on premises, because I have the ability to work with all these cross-functional teams within Intel and able to bring that agnostic view to the customer that really makes the customer successful in their journey.
So that gives you a very unique position, right?
It does.
Because yeah, so does, and that's why you're talking to us about cloud strategy, because AWS, which they should do, is going to come in and tell you everything should be running on AWS. And Microsoft's going to say the same thing about Azure. But with you, you have exposure to all this, so you understand it has to be more strategic than just lift and shift everything over. So, what kind of strategies do you employ now when you're talking to Intel's customers? When you're talking to Intel's, what we call our end users, right? The people using our technology. What kind of strategies do you use when approaching them? What do you do? Because you got all these tools and you know about all these different clouds, private clouds, public clouds, hybrid clouds, AWS, VMware, all this. Where do you start?
Yeah. And the way I see this, Darren, is maybe 10, 15 years back, or maybe even 6 years back, when everyone got excited about cloud, a lot of our, the leadership within different organizations had one strategy: cloud first. Think of cloud first. Now, that strategy is a little more prescriptive because it kind of, mandates in one way to think of doing everything in the cloud. If you're creating a new project, a new application, start with cloud, right? Unless there is a super strong reason not to do so. But over the years, as organizations and enterprises have taken this journey and understood kind of the values of different kind of cloud environments, whether multi-cloud or hybrid cloud, something that has translated from the cloud first approach is something like a cloud smart approach. And the way it resonates in my mind is that, okay, when I do a new project, when I do a new application, when I speak, want to do something, like a business value, what does make sense for me? I need to think about it strategically. Like, obviously, if I want to get hold of new technologies, cloud is probably the way to look for it, because that's where the new technologies will be available super quickly and maybe ahead of your on-premises environment. But if I'm running my business for a long time, my business is going to stay, my users are going to expand and increase, exponentially, geographically. I need to think about, is there an inflection point where it makes sense for me to run that business somewhere else? Is there a constraint on data residency requirements? Is there a constraint on compliance requirements? Is there a constraint for something which is super latency sensitive? Even like a fraction of a millisecond will be detrimental for the end user experience. So thinking of all these things together and keeping cloud in mind to make the best decision of what actually makes sense to host in cloud versus what makes sense to maybe start your initial development in cloud and then bring it back into some more controlled environments depending on the specific requirements of your customers and your product.
No, I understand. Understanding the data, I love that. Understanding applications, data sovereignty. What benefits are there to even moving to the cloud? It sounds like a lot of work, frankly, right? To move to the cloud, because I still have to architect stuff. It's not lift and shift. It's not cloud first, it's cloud smart. So, in order for me to get smart, what are the benefits of using the cloud or public cloud over what I'm doing today? Otherwise, why move? Just because everyone else is? That doesn't do well when you're talking to the board of directors, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, absolutely, there are benefits of moving to the cloud where it makes sense, and when it makes sense for the phase of the project it makes sense on. So, for things like like scalability, right? I mean,
Okay, so scalability.
yeah, like as we all understand, in a cloud environment, it is almost like super easy to grow and shrink, right? You can grow when there is demand, you can shrink when the demand goes down, and this ensures that your applications can handle different, like, varying levels of traffic and varying levels of workload transactions without over provisioning or underutilization, which might be, some of the constraints you will have on premises, because there is no elasticity built into the on premises way of architecting softwares. That's one. Um, there is also the aspect of the super well-known concept of capex versus opex,
Oh
because
yeah, yeah.
because in cloud you can pay as you go, right? That's the model, and customers or organizations will pay for what they use, and this can absolutely lead to cost savings. But what we have learned over the years working with all our different customers is that it needs to be governed and monitored, because cloud without the proper governance and proper monitoring, your cost vector can increase super fast and exponentially. So yes, cloud can be cost efficient when it is used with the proper constraints, for proper governance, and with the proper monitoring in place.
Okay, so in order, I want to touch on the cost thing,
Sure.
right, a little bit more, because there's been this big push to move to the cloud to save cost. But what you're telling me is that that's not always the case. I have to monitor that cost much more
Absolutely.
tightly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll give you one example, Darren. So let's say in an on-premises environment, if you are storing, audit information of who is accessing when, information changing,
Okay.
log information, there is no additional cost because you already purchased whatever storage equipment you have.
Right,
But
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but in cloud, imagine if someone has, an S3 bucket in AWS where they have enabled versioning, and those versions are not being purged, and there is no need to keep those versioning. So every operation you do on the data, every change you do is going to add a new version. So not only you're expanding data, you are keeping so many new versions. So your storage cost will increase a lot. Same is logging. Like look at all the logging information that happens
Right.
in any cloud provider, CloudTrail or CloudWatch. And if those audit logs or whatever logging information is not managed, or not deleted when it's not needed, and not managed and governed, your storage cost will also increase exponentially. And not to forget about data egress, because if you're architecting your solution in such a way that you have to get data from your cloud environment and bring that data somewhere else, there's a lot of cost associated with that data movement. So that's what I meant, that it makes sense. It is cost efficient based on certain governance and certain monitoring and certain best practices that has to be built in, so that when it hits your budget alert, you can take the action.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned this because I was working with the Canadian government on several different cloud projects years ago, and it's when they were first starting to use cloud. They put SAP into the cloud, but not all of it went over there. Some of it stayed back in their data center, so they were communicating between on cloud and on prem. A lot of data moving back and forth, and they blew their egress. Their budget went through the roof. I
Yeah.
mean, they blew their budget out completely because of the amount of data that was actually moving back and forth. Um, they changed their model, they moved things in. They also learned that because it's a consumption model, the cloud is a consumption model. I
Right.
have something running, I'm paying for it. Where in my data center, my cost to keep something up 24/7 is minuscule. I already bought the equipment, which is the biggest cost.
Hmm.
There is some energy cost, but it's minuscule compared to my overall my overall capital expenditures that I spent.
Yeah.
But in the cloud, you're paying whether you're using it or not. You're paying to have that application up and running.
Yep. Yep.
Right. So they changed their model. They changed the way that they thought about things. They said, well, we don't need this instance running 24/7. We only need it running 16/5,
Yep.
16 hours, 5 days a week. And they saved a lot of money by going to that approach, by turning it down or off over the weekends when no one was using it.
True.
Um, so
Like,
that I understand the cost thing, but if you don't control it, it blows out of proportion very quickly.
yeah. And the other thing, I think we have seen our customers also mature as they have been taking this journey, is that you need to distinguish between your production environment, which is running your money making application, versus your development and test environments.
Hell
If you
yes.
don't need like huge machine sizes to support development, then have a governance policy that will prohibit people from spinning up huge machines in development. that policies that will shut down those environments maybe on weekends, on holidays, and whatnot. So the thing is, yes, I mean, the way I see is cloud is an infinite capability place. You can do many things and everything under this, kind of
As
the
long as you
stack.
have enough money.
Yeah, you have to put the right controls in place. Otherwise, it's just going to blow out of proportion.
Yeah, no. I've seen the same thing in some startups that, spun up a bunch of test servers to run all their testing and left them on. And they were like, why is our bill $150,000 from Amazon? And they go back and look and they see, oh, all of our test machines are still up and running, even though we only run tests one day a week. Well, we kept them up and running because it saved us 5 minutes, but cost you $150,000.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make sense. So would you say that cloud almost exposes bad practice, bad process, the bad way that we do development and product deployments?
But perhaps I won't call it bad. The way I see, would see
Okay.
that, within the cloud, you can get super smart agility. Like you can really have your development teams become very smart in agility because you now have all the tools, whether it be an tool for infrastructure provisioning as code that you can treat as code and drive through your DevOps processes in your CI/CD pipelines. You can have all the CI/CD tools in place, so everything is there. But the point still remains is that you need to make sure that you have the right gates and the right decision points to make sure that those are being used within the constraints of the project, within the requirements of the project. So
So
that's
it,
how I
it's
see it.
yeah, it sounds to me then like I need some organizational change in order to move to the cloud because I'm operating differently.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the biggest inhibitors still true probably today, that training and workforce enablement with the new knowledge, with the new tools, with the new learning. That is probably one of the biggest, still kind of the biggest challenges that most enterprises have, because we are all as developers kind of so used to doing things that we have been doing for the past many years,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and trying to learn that in a new platform and embracing that and really understanding how to use it to our advantage, that takes quite a bit of learning. And every organization, I think what more we are seeing is putting in more and more emphasis and efforts in kind of encouraging that learning and the enablement of all the engineering teams.
Very interesting. Okay. So we've talked about some factors: cost, scalability. Well, and with cost, elasticity, right? Because I can grow and shrink what I'm using dynamically if I'm intelligent about it in the cloud, right? Because I can turn things off and turn them back on very easily if I put the effort into place. What are some of the other benefits of moving to cloud? That because otherwise, why would I change?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are many, right? So we talked about a few, but think of the accessibility, Darren, right? So if I
Okay,
have my
accessibility.
engineering team, developing something in the cloud, they can access it anywhere where they have an internet connection. They don't need any specialized equipment or anything. So that's that kind of unleashes the whole kind of the accessibility, the collaboration that people can do in cloud. That is also super strong. The global reach. Think of the global reach, because most of our cloud providers, they have data centers pretty much in every corner of the globe. So if an organization have to support customers in Asia Pacific or somewhere else in the world, they don't need to set up their servers in Americas. They can set up the servers closer to where the users are. So that way the latency will be less, the customers will have a better experience. And not to say, if there are like data sovereignty requirements we talked about, they can also fulfill those kind of requirements.
So this was big during COVID, right? The companies that were already moved to the cloud more than likely had a lot smaller hurdle to overcome to keep people working because they could work from anywhere
Hmm.
as long as they had an internet connection. They could still access their resources in the cloud.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Huh.
And go ahead. You were saying something.
Well, I was just saying that it's that flexibility, it's not and accessibility, and I love how you tied collaboration in there too, because I can access it from anywhere and anyone on my team that, and we do this at Intel, right? I mean, my team, we're scattered in 5 different time zones,
Yep.
right? So I can access my data anywhere, and I'm not hitting the corporate network to do it,
Yep. Yep.
which is pretty slick.
Yep. The other thing I wanted to mention, I mean, this is probably a new angle that has come up. So, I mean, if we see, let's take the example of AWS. So when within AWS there is something called the well-architected framework. There are 5 pillars before. Now there is a 6th pillar, which is sustainability, right? So the environmental impact. So a lot of our enterprise customers, for very right reasons, also have a sustainability goal, right? Like a greener
Right. Yeah.
kind of a goal. And cloud is probably something that helps to fulfill that to some extent, because most of these cloud providers, they operate at such a gigantic global scale. They have all the goodness of baking in all the sustainability controls and the carbon neutral footprint and everything. So if a customer is using cloud, they inherently get some of those benefits that they can establish within their sustainability goals and their environmental goals they have as part of their organization. So it's a new angle. It's developing, but this is also something I'm hearing from some of the customers in some recent conversations.
That's really interesting. So if I have a sustainability goal in my company, I can leverage what AWS and Google and Azure are doing as far as sustainability, because they can run their data centers more green than I can,
True.
right? And at much higher scale than I can.
Yep.
So I'm actually contributing to my sustainability goals of the company as well. That's a really interesting angle.
Yep. And the way I kind of see this intersects with how we kind of drive our kind of optimization story from Intel perspective is, whenever we have come up with a newer generation of Xeon in cloud, that is obviously better performant than any previous generation, right? So that means when customers are making an effort for legitimate reasons and justifiable reasons to operate their workload on the latest generation of Xeon, they can actually use lesser compute cycles to do the same work that they were doing before. Now, if you translate that compute cycle into some metric that gives you some reading based on how much energy you're using, you are coming green, because now with the newer Xeon, you can use lesser compute cycles to do the same work. So that's another way a lot of customers can see benefit of using cloud services on latest and greatest Intel architecture to be able to address some of their sustainability goals.
If I want the latest and greatest technology, I don't have to buy it for my own data center. I can try it out in a cloud first, because
Absolutely.
the cloud service providers are getting Intel's latest Xeon processors at the same time the OEMs are, right? So they're able to deploy it much faster than me deploying it on-prem. So maybe I do have a workload that I want to keep on-prem in production. I can do my development and try them out in the cloud first on that new silicon before I bring it in-house. That's pretty clever too.
Yep.
Okay. Any other things around my cloud strategy? As I'm trying to put this all together, you've given me some business things to think about and some understanding on the benefits of cloud. What other things do I need to worry about around my cloud strategy when I'm developing my strategy and operating model?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you need to, like I was talking about, you need to think of um, how do you determine that what applications you will want to move to cloud when you are migrating, right? So it's not an easy decision, because a lot of our enterprises, they have been built over the years with hundreds and thousands of
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
with many dependencies in place. So there is one phase in every cloud migration which is kind of planning and assessment. I feel like that is one of the most important phases, because in that planning and assessment phase is where you really want to discover what you have in your environment. And then as you look at it, you figure out, okay, what applications I have, what licenses do I have, what are the terms and conditions of those licenses, looking at the applications and really trying to understand that, okay, is this an application that will benefit from the benefits of cloud, right? So the benefits of cloud, like we talked about, flexibility, scalability. If that application is probably something your backend report that runs a data warehouse report at the end of the day, I mean, really, if there is a need to move that application to cloud versus another application which is your customer facing and actually is your kind of bloodline or like money making application. So those kind of considerations absolutely need to be done, and there are many ways to do it. There are things like 6 R's of migration, which talks about whether you want to rehost, replatform, refactor, retire. I mean, retire, we have also seen some applications that don't have much business value, so they can sunset and retire at some point with the right,
So this is a really good time when you're doing your cloud strategy to clean house with all the application, because everyone has it. Everyone has application sprawl. Oh, I bought this stuff, but I'm not really using it, or I've got one person using it, but it's costing me a lot to keep it up and going. So interesting. It sounds like this is just an opportunity to really change the way that you do business. Whether you move to the cloud or not, your strategy is to understand better what's going on with your data and applications in your organization.
And as you do that, also look upon the application and really understand that whether it is better positioned as a hybrid cloud offering versus a private cloud versus a public cloud. Because certain applications there is no one size fits all. That statement is so true in any aspect of of a cloud conversation.
So has your opinion changed moving over here into Intel, where now you're talking to several different clouds and customers?
I'm glad you asked it, because during my days at AWS, the only thing that I really wanted to do, 2 things. Number one, help my customer be their best, in their best interest, but at the same time, bring value back to Amazon by migrating the application on the cloud platform. But here, I have been part of conversations where customers have decided to repatriate from cloud to somewhere else, or repatriate to one cloud versus multiple clouds for legitimate reasons. We see that a lot in government, because in government there is a lot of applications that need to work with cross portability. There's vendor lock-in, right? So things like that have come to much more light and much more significance in my experience here at Intel, which I didn't have before.
Well, hey, this has been wonderful, Rajiv. Thank you, absolutely, thank you for coming on the show, giving us insight into strategy. And for those that are listening, Rajiv is going to be joined by several other cloud solution architects at Intel, talking about different aspects of this migration and this cloud strategy. So, Rajiv, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Darren. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you enjoyed our podcast, give it 5 stars on your favorite podcasting site or YouTube channel. You can find out more information about Embracing Digital Transformation at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, go out and do something wonderful.